Here on the Colour of Country Life Flow FM, we're joined now to look at the grain and oilseed sector by Dennis Voznesenski from Rabobank. Dennis, welcome back.
Thanks, Ricky. How are you doing?
Very good, thank you. And look, record numbers in our broadcast areas in terms of what came in. There was a bit of nervousness during the harvest, but it's a big number when it's grains or the canola sector.
Yeah, look, if you look at national figures, I mean, the ABARES last year said around 36 million tonnes of wheat. I've seen estimates, and I think some of your listeners would have seen estimates as well in the industry, even higher, even as much as 40 million tonnes, 41. So it's a monstrous crop for canola. Second time in a row we're having above 7 million tonnes, which is unheard of, considering that the average used to be 3 to 4 million tonnes. So it's a lot, definitely.
And how is, I guess it's probably too soon to see any price movement off the back of that big harvest because it's going to take a while to move through the system, but it seems like the pricing's been reasonably resilient, hasn't it?
Yeah, pricing has been reasonably resilient. If you compare our local pricing to global, I mean, the West Coast are having more severe challenges than the East Coast, and especially more challenges than in South Australia. South Australia is doing very well compared to everywhere else. West Coast, I mean, it's quite unprecedented to have not only these volumes, but so many good crops in a row that despite all the extra capacity they're putting online, which is a lot, it's just too much to handle right now on the West Coast. But if you look at South Australia, I mean, you're in a great position. There's more capacity to export than there is grain. So if we're looking at it, how does South Australia compare? It's very well.
And there were concerns during the harvest because we did have a number of wet periods, particularly in southern New South Wales. How did the quality turn out across the board as well?
Look, it varies significantly. So if you look at southern New South Wales, you look at parts of Victoria, there's, of course, a lot of quality issues. But I think everyone feared the worst when the floods and the excess rain happened. And they thought, we're going to be absolutely, sorry for the pun, that we're going to be awash with really low quality grain. So a lot of feed barley, a lot of feed wheat. While there still was a lot of it, I don't think there was as much as everyone expected or everyone feared. And we still have a lot of good quality crop as well.
Now, I just want to talk about export markets in a moment, but where are the figures going to stand in terms of on-farm storage? Do we now have ABARES and others? Are they surveying to find out how much farmers are sitting on? Because doesn't the data largely rely on what's reported by the likes of Viterra and CBH? Yeah,
the reporting of the grain traders is, from my understanding, quite limited. And the government, so the last time the government collected data on how much permanent on-farm storage there is was 2009, 2010, that marketing year. And from my understanding, they don't frequently release how much tons there are around Australia. Our crop reports do. We look at roughly, we go to our network around Australia, we say roughly in all these regions, what proportion of, say, last year's harvest do you think still remains on farm? I'm actually doing a project right now that's going to calculate for the first time since 2009 and how much permanent on-farm storage there is in Australia. That's going to be released later in the year. But right now, there's no figures saying how much there's left. I'd say there's still a fair bit, though.
Absolutely. And with all that grain and all that canola, are we going to find a home for it? How are our export markets looking? And we keep looking at China. Are things opening up there?
Yeah, that's an interesting one with China. I swear, right now, there's again rumors that China's going to come back to our barley. Seems a little bit more probable than previous years because they're finally opened up after COVID. But I would be very hesitant to say that, yes, definitely they're coming back, because every year around this time, the rumor mill starts spreading that they're coming back. It seems a bit more substantive this time, so I'm not saying it's out of the realm of possibility that China comes back for barley, but I definitely wouldn't peg it as a certainty. As regards to the rest of the world, well, wheat prices are still high historically. Corn prices, which is a reflection of feed prices, which feed barley plays into, they're still high. So the demand's still there. One question is about canola, because we produce so much that the European Union theoretically doesn't need that much canola. So where are we going to sell it once the European demand dries up? Well, we'll have to sell it somewhere cheaper where they don't subsidize all those biofuels, and hence our canola.
And we've almost got through this conversation without talking about the war in Ukraine. It is the 1-year anniversary. Is that still having a major impact?
What the war in Ukraine is doing is, well, firstly, the grain corridor is still going. They have to renew it in March, but it's still ongoing. Despite the grain continuing to flow from Ukraine, it obviously adds a risk premium to market. So if we were in the same global stocks position right now, but there was no war in Ukraine, prices theoretically would be lower. But because there's the risk that what if the Ukraine grain corridor gets cancelled? What if Russia makes a lot of headway into Ukraine and they start having issues with their cropping? That all means that prices would have to go high, and that's why we have a risk premium in there. You have to remember right now, Ukrainian planting, Ukrainian cropping is actually going surprisingly well. Their supply chains for fertilizer availability are still there. It's just the issue is having the money to pay for the fertilizer. But if they can pay for it, they can get it. They can get the seed. So that is actually going surprisingly well. But if Russia makes headway into it, into Ukraine, it starts disrupting all of it.
Well, fascinating stuff, and it sounds like you've got a whole lot more data, Dennis, from Rabobank. Where can they get that data from?
Well, I frequently post on Twitter at Voz_Dennis whenever there is something new that comes out, but we have a Rabo research portal for our clients where they can access it with a login any day.
Dennis Voznesenski is an agriculture analyst at Rabobank. Thanks so much for all that detail today.
Thanks, Ricky.